Good evening. We are talking about today misinformation and disinformation. We live in an era of Pied Pipers. If you're familiar with the story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin, it is based on a very real thing. That is, folks in Germany brainwashing children and leading them on a crusade to retake the Holy Land, right? They convinced everyone that the innocence of children would allow them to retake Jerusalem. And so they marched hundreds of thousands of children down south to the peak, right, of Italy, to the end of Italy, to divide the Mediterranean as Moses did the Red Sea so they could walk to Jerusalem, right? A fool's errand, if you will. Most of those children never made it back home, right? So a Pied Piper leading people to ruin with nonsense, right? False, fake information. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. There are these people, you might call them influencers, right? Or we're not talking about the Instagram influencers necessarily here. What we're talking about is individuals who wish to wreak chaos in one form or another, right? They are doing this on purpose, right? There's several types of people. The disinformer. The disinformer is spewing nonsense on purpose, right? The misinformer is spewing nonsense because they're an idiot, right? They don't know any better. All right, we live in a very unique time in human history, right? We can look at ancient times with the peasants, right? Or the medieval era with peasants, right? People who were stupid because they didn't have a choice, right? There was no education available to them, right? So they were stupid by circumstance. This is the modern era right now, in this very time, is very unique because what we have today are people who choose stupid, right? They're not stupid by circumstance, they're stupid by choice, which in many ways makes them the dumbest people in the history of humanity, right? Because they had enlightenment offered to them for free, and instead of enlightenment, they chose ignorance, right? They chose ignorance over enlightenment. All right? And what we are seeing today in this world with the internet today is individuals who are preying on the meek, right? Preying on the weak of mind, the uneducated, and warping them and turning them into their little followers, right? This could be things like ancient aliens. This could be white supremacy. This could be black supremacy, all right? We're going to do another segment where we talk about cults, right? We talk plenty about the occult as well as some cult things, especially when we talked in our previous video about the Nazis, right? But many of these conspiracy theorists, these disinformers, they act, in many of the ways that a cult does, right? They are trying to get you to reject reality, right? They need you to reject reality so that you can accept their anti-reality, right? And what is reality, right? What is human civilization? What are the pillars of human civilization? And that's the same as what is the pillars of reality. We're talking about things like the government, right? Religion, education, science, history, right? If they can get you, and this is the first thing they're going to do to you, and when we talk about cults too, this is the same thing. The first thing these brainwashers or individuals who want to commit menticide or percepticide upon you in order to turn you into one of their acolytes, right, is they need you to reject those pillars of reality or human civilization. They need you to no longer trust or believe the government. They need you to no longer trust or believe religion. They need you to no longer trust or believe science. They need you to no longer trust or believe history or medicine, right? Or you get the idea, a lot of different things. Once you don't believe in that, right? When you're presented with something by historian says to you, oh, that's not true, this is the way it went, that individual will no longer trust the historian. They'll no longer trust the doctor. They'll no longer trust the government, trust the priest, etc. That is the purpose of this, of the rejection of reality, right? They get them to reject reality. They can lead them wherever they like, right? We talk about Jesus, right? Jesus in the idea of the Bible was known as the Good Shepherd, right? What we have, these disinformers, are the dark shepherd, right? These people wish to shepherd you down a path of ruin and insanity, right? That's where they want to lead you to. Okay, and yeah, they'll ruin you completely. Menticide upon you, right? They're going to destroy your critical thinking abilities. They're going to destroy your thought process in general, and generally speaking, they're just going to destroy you and ruin your life because you're going to end up believing in so much nonsense. You're no longer going to be a functioning member of society. Right, and we see, and even more dangerous, a damaging aspect to you, the society you live in, as well as human civilization at large, right? Because if a disinformer convinces you of all this nonsense about ancient aliens or white supremacy or black supremacy or whatever, and what they're going to do is they're not going to just convert you into one of them. They're going to convert you into a spreader of this disinformation, right? So now you are one of them, okay? And now you're spreading all this nonsense at large, and the movement can grow larger and larger and larger and larger. Now, what is the reason for these disinformers? One, all right, one is the imbecile, right? When we look at a lot of these people, the idea is that why put all my time and effort to, let's say, study history, when I can just make it up, right? Why do I don't have to go to school for 10 years, higher education for 10 years to be an expert in something, when I can just make all of this up and start my own history, right? And there will be people like that. I remember this guy I used to work with. Complete fucking moron, right? Thought he was an expert at everything. He a lot of these things he had never studied a day in his life. I remember one time he hired a personal trainer, right? He went in the first day to his personal trainer, and on the second day, he was teaching the personal trainer how to train people, right? He was like, no, these are the workouts you should be doing. He was bossing around the personal trainer and trying to educate him and teach him all this bullshit. The same with history, right? He would come up to me and try to teach me history without even knowing anything about it, right? He would start talking all these conspiracies about Egypt, and I would say, well, let's say his name's Tim, is like, well, Tim, have you ever studied the history of Egypt? He says, no, I don't need to study the history of Egypt to know about it. Okay, how can you know about something without having learned about it first? All right, that's a lot of these people are like that. They don't want to study Egyptology, but they are an expert on Egypt. They are, right? They don't need to read a history book because everything in the history book is fake facts or what have you, and so they're an expert on Egypt without ever having studied Egypt. Blows my mind. The next place he went to after he was fired from the job we were working at, after many second chances because he was an idiot, in a lot of other ways, he got him a job as a mechanic, right? And he told them that he knew everything, right? He knew all about it. And the very first day he goes in there, of course, he knew nothing about cars. The first day he goes in there, he starts trying to teach all of the mechanics how to do their jobs and how to be a mechanic with just a bunch of utter nonsense, right? He was given in charge of locking up the shop that night. He was such an idiot, he failed to lock up the shop and the place was robbed. So he was fired the next day, and on and on and on his resume of stupidness. Suffice to say that that is one of these types of individuals, the so-called know-it-all, who doesn't spend any time actually learning. All right, and that's going to be a lot of these people who are going to be the misinformed, right? Who are going to be targeted are these idiots. The disinformer, though, the individual, one of the primary we talked about the first type is the idiot. The second type is the malicious, right? What do I mean by malicious? I mean someone who is deliberately spreading false information in order to cause chaos, right? In order to cause anarchy, in order to cause harm, either to civilization at large, society at large, to a particular country, or to just quite simply your brain. It's called, one of it is narcissist, right? I'm trying to think of psychopath. That's psychopath, right? People don't believe me when I say this. The internet is the perfect place to do all of these things. We look at cyber crimes. They have taken off. Real life crimes going down. Cyber crimes going way up. Because it's really hard to catch these people, right? The vast majority of thefts that are committed now take place on the internet, right? They hack their way into your stuff. That's the new way of being a thief, because it's really, really hard to catch you that way, right? You can do it all by your computer. You can cause chaos without having to actually really put much effort into it, right? The same way with these psychopathic individuals, okay? They don't need to do these things in person anymore. They can do it on the internet, and they can affect a far larger audience, right? To do crazy shit, to exert their power over other people and get off on it, right? They're sitting behind, they're getting off on corrupting all these people and destroying their brains and turning them into lunatics. They get off on it, okay? And there are a lot of people like that do it. We look at COVID disinformation, right, on the vaccine, silly stuff like that. It boils down to 12 people. There's only 12 people who are spreading all this stuff. That's where it all stems from, is just 12 people, 12 psychopaths, right? It's not millions of people. It all stemmed from these 12 psychopaths who weren't connected, but all started getting that ball rolling, spreading the bullshit around everywhere they could on the internet. And then the movement grew. And the stupidity grew and grew and grew, right? I got my COVID vaccine. The next morning, I threw up a camera. The government's spying on me. All sorts of nonsense, right? Or they're putting, microchips. What is other nonsense? Like all these sorts of things that can't fit in a tiny-ass needle. Like I threw up a Nissan camera this morning and from the fucking shot they gave me. And people will believe it. Why? Why, right? We just talked about it earlier. How could someone be so dumb that they could believe that somebody can inject you with a fucking camera in your arm, right? For a COVID shot. Because they had already rejected reality. They had already rejected the government, right? They had already been convinced that they could not trust the government, that they cannot trust COVID, that they cannot trust doctors, right? And so it's these little steps they're taking you down, and then you get all the way down here to the bottom of their bullshit, and at the bottom of Bullshit Mountain is cameras inside of needles. I know it's completely, hard to fathom. Like, how could someone get to this point? The best way to identify a liar, a disinformist, is to know him by what he is not, okay? The Bible, regardless of your religion, is a great source of wisdom. The number one thing the Bible continually warns about is lies and false prophets. In fact, one of the enders of the world in Revelations is the Antichrist, right? This figure who pretends to be love, who pretends to be everything Jesus represents, but actually isn't. We think about the devil, right? The embodiment of evil in the Abrahamic religions, right? What is the devil? Is he the prince of murderers? Is he the prince of thieves? No, he's not Alibaba, right? He's he's the prince of lies, right? And so this embodiment of evil and his moniker, the Prince of Lies, tells us that the lie is the deadliest thing, right? The deadliest of sins, right? And the most dangerous, right? The world falls, right? Adam and Eve in the biblical creation story, the world falls because the lies the serpent devil tells to Eve, right? The world ends in Revelations because of the Antichrist, right? This false prophet who acts as a Christ figure. We think of demons, right? This terrible evil thing that everybody's scared of, right? In horror movies, right? Do demons go around murdering people, raping people? No, they don't. They're influencers, right? They influence others to do terrible evils. Lying is categorized as a terrible, terrible evil and one of the most deadly sins. And the reason why is because if we take a serial killer, right, he could kill 30 people. It's terrible. Now, what about a serial killer who can lie, who can cast a dream, who can persuade hundreds of people to kill other people, thousands of people to kill other people, right? The liar is the great multiplier of evil, right? It's not just one person, it's a spreader, right? It's a contagion of evil, and that is what the disinformer aims to do, right? Not long ago, a poor fellow who was brainwashed by ancient aliens nonsense killed his own children because he believed they had reptilian ancient alien DNA inside them, right? This disinformation about ancient aliens caused him to slay his own children. Okay? Disinformation about COVID, right? We talk about how does somebody snap out of this, right? We talked about with the Nazis, the lie that casts a dream, and these individuals are living in a dreamlike state, an alternate reality. How does someone wake up from that? Well, oftentimes it takes something radical. Every couple days on the news, you'll hear a story about somebody on their deathbed from COVID who had previously believed COVID wasn't real, all of a sudden saying, is their last words, I was wrong, COVID is real, I made a mistake, oh God, please help me, I'm dying, right? It takes that to snap people out of that, right? And snap people out of all the COVID disinformation stuff. And even then, every now and then, you'll still see a story of somebody on their deathbed, as they're dying, still not believing COVID is real as they die from it. Okay? So some people are quite simply lost causes to this stuff. And it goes to show you just how dangerous this stuff is. That disinformation those people spread about COVID got that person killed. They died due to that. Whoever they infected might have died from that disinformation. All right? With the ancient aliens, that man slew his children because of that disinformation. All right? Do not pretend, do not think that what these people are doing is not evil. Do not mistake idiocy for innocence. Okay? Because it will fool you every time. There are, again, we mentioned two types of people. The disinformer. The disinformer is someone who knows what they are saying is a lie. They know it is bullshit. They are telling people this to cause chaos and for fun. They think it's funny to cause anarchy, chaos, and they get off on it because quite simply, they are an evil individual. They are psychotic, right? The other type is the misinformer, the idiot, right? The ignorant one, someone who has chosen idiocy over enlightenment. We talked about ignorance over enlightenment. That's what we're talking about. The misinformer is someone who's chosen ignorance over enlightenment and therefore has fallen for the lies. Right? They've fallen for the lies of the disinformer, and they are spreading it out far and wide. they don't know any better because they're ignorant, right? They do not know that what they are telling is a lie. I know with the spell of a false prophet can be very hard to break, right? I know that when the Holocaust in Germany was happening, everybody knew that the Holocaust was happening. That's one of the great mythos of the 20th century, is that nobody in Germany knew what was going on. Everybody knew what was going on, right? Everybody knew the Holocaust was happening, yet no one chose to believe it. Like, followers of Hitler did not choose to believe it. They could not believe that was true, right? So they could not believe reality was in fact real, right? They could not believe this God they have birthed was actually a demon, okay? They had placed him on the pedestal of a god, and Hitler could do no wrong. Therefore, this can't be true, right? There's no such thing as a Holocaust. That he's not doing that. That's not possible, right? And it was rather surprising, and they didn't snap out of it until they were forced to be shown footage of the Holocaust, of these concentration camps, and only then did people actually believe it was happening after the war. And even then, some still don't believe. Some still don't believe. Well, Holocaust deniers, right? So reality can unfortunately be very subjective, and that's what makes fact-checking so important, that you don't get caught in one of these spells. How do we stop disinformation and misinformation? Well, the most obvious thing is to educate our populace, to make them impenetrable to bullshit, right? That people are trying to effectively inject in people's minds, right? The very first thing to do would be to learn the basics of how to fact check. That is your best weapon against bullshit, against misinformation, disinformation, against conspiracy theories, and against the cults, right? And I don't mean a cult, but I mean like a religious cult, a political cult, etc., etc., etc. And a cult could be anything. It could be the Ku Klux Klan, right? It could be the Black Panthers, right? It could be militant atheism, right? Which is honestly very, very problematic right now. It could be the Westboro Baptist Church, or some other weird extreme form of Christianity, which would be called heretical or an apostasy, right? As in, it's deviated so much from Christianity that it's no longer like of that same religion. It's its own crazy thing. You could have Scientology as a cult, Jehovah's Witnesses, many cult-like aspects with them, right? So there's all sorts of cults, religious, political, right? And then like the Nazis, political, and then ideological, like the Ku Klux Klan, the Black Panthers, etc., right? The new Patriot Party that's forming, which is actually like a branch off of neo-Confederacy and neo-Nazism combining to create what they call the Patriot Party. Yeah, exactly. So there's all sorts, and that's the thing. They'll do that too. There'll be a bunch of ex-neo-Nazis that form something called the Patriot Party, and that sounds absolutely nice. Like, Patriot, I'm a patriot. I love my country. Of course I'm interested in joining. Gotcha. Right? It's really a neo-Nazi thing. So there are all sorts of these people out there. Now, how do we fact check something? How do we do that? It's really simple. A Google search would dispel 80% of this crap they spread on the internet. Could be dispelled by a Google search or a website like Snopes, okay? The next thing is our reading materials. The things we read. They haven't just fucked up the internet. These people haven't. They fucked up bookstores. I went in, where is this thing? I went into the Barnes & Noble the other day and bought this piece of shit. This is called The Secret History of the World. And it's supposed to be about things like alchemists, the Garden of Eden, the Knights Templar, the Illuminati, the Green King, the Prophets, the Sphinx and the Time Lock, Gnostics and Shamans, and Zarathustra, the Neolithic Alexander, etc. And I was kind of like, okay, this is, this could be cool. It's on a bookshelf in Barnes & Noble. It says this, New York Times bestseller. This must be the real deal because it's on the history shelf, right? No, it's not a history book. I get home that night, like excited to look at my new book because I didn't really pay much attention. I just looked at the label. I'm like, oh, cool. I like researching cults and all that stuff. I'll get this book and I'll learn about it. This book is absolute bullshit that is basically a bunch of conspiracies upon conspiracies. The guy, interestingly enough, he talks to these idiot wizards who tell him, we talked about the know-it-all earlier, but basically they tell this author all this stuff. They're like, oh, hey, Mr. History Author, guess what? I know all about the Elysian mysteries that happened in Greece 3,000 years ago, and I'll tell you all about it. And the reason I know is because it's been handed down through my family for 3,000 years. And all this stuff like, oh, sure, I know all about the Druids. My great person was a whatever, was a Druid. And they just go on and on and on with this bullshit. It's a conspiracy of conspiracies of conspiracies. I remember talking to my girlfriend on the phone when I was looking at it, and I was like, oh no. Oh no. That's literally all I could say was, oh no, for like 20 minutes. Because I was so shocked that I had bought this piece of shit. And I want to burn it, but there's something about burning books didn't sit right with me. And I would also like to return it and get my money back, but I can't do that because then it would be putting it back on the bookshelf, and then it could get sold to someone else. And yeah, I don't know what to do with it. It can't sit on my bookshelf forever because this is offensively stupid. Anyway, this is brainwashing propaganda is what this is. Now, it was in the history section at Barnes & Noble with New York Times bestseller on it. That lets you know how bad it has really gotten out there when it comes to misinformation and disinformation. That you can go to an established bookstore, go to the history section where there are supposed to be history books, and find this piece of shit. A bunch of false information that has nothing to do with actual history and is all just a bunch of made-up crap by a bunch of fake wizard magician idiots. All right. Now, this could have been stopped if the author had actually done fact-checking. How do we fact-check? How do we know a book is good? Because we know what bullshit looks like. It's this, all right? Now, notice something on the pages here. Notice something on the pages. How do I know? How do we can tell this is partly bullshit for a history book? Notice that. Let's go to the end. Let's go to references, right? Are there references? What? He just lists a bunch of crap. Like, he doesn't even put a page number or anything. Look at this. He lists the name of the rose by Umberto Eco as part of his reference and his bibliography. The name of the rose is a fiction novel. Okay, that one's a nonsense book. Bob Dylan. Why is Chronicles Volume 1 by Bob Dylan? What the fuck does Bob Dylan know about ancient Greek mystery cults or the fucking Sphinx or the Way of the Wizard or Islam or what? Why is Bob Dylan you get what I'm saying? The bibliography is, I'm sorry I keep using the F word, the bibliography is fucked, right? There are no footnotes, right? That's a key indicator. Either you want to see something at the bottom of the page called footnotes, or you want to see endnotes. Any book you read. As I was putting that down, I just saw a weird image of some demon whispering in Jesus' ear that the author apparently drew. Anyway, God knows what that's about. I'm not going to read it anymore. Here's a good indicator, right? This right here. This is called Roman Civilization Selected Readings. Pay attention to that. Footnotes at the bottom of the page. That's how you know you have a real history book. Footnotes at the bottom of the page and end notes. Actual bibliography, lists all his sources, nice, clean. Even lists the page number as well, where you can double check him yourself, right? This is a peer-reviewed book, right? And one way we can tell that is right here. This is the most trustworthy thing I use when I study history, is this right here, because I know it's a good source. Columbia University Press, okay? Most of mine, I admit, are from Oxford University Press. They put out a lot of books. but a university press put that book out. What is a university press? A university press, what that means is that it has been peer reviewed. Individuals at the university, professors, academics, have looked through this book, they've double checked it, they fact checked it, and they've signed off on it, right? They've signed off on it, so this book is good to go. You're actually, and that's a guarantee that what you're going to be learning is real and it's good to go, all right? So that's the very first thing, right? If you see a history book and it's like this one, Cabinet of Greek Curiosities. Freaking love this book. Lots of weird, and like we've seen this, lots of stuff that some of the videos of the past I've taken information from this book to use for it, but this at the end, Oxford University Press. I know this is going to be a legitimate book with real facts in it. Another type of book we can look at is this one here. The Crusades, and this is for the average person, this is probably more what they're going to be reading. Crusades and the Crusader Knights. Now, this book isn't going to have a lot of sources listed, but what it is a really good general history book, right? It's a good general history book. You can tell a lot has been put into this. It's a good publisher. We can read about the author some, and we can tell that he's not a bad guy, etc., etc., etc. And these kind of general history books are like an illustrated history of, or a history of, or an encyclopedia of, etc. This type of book is usually going to be good to go, okay? So those are some ways we can tell things about these things, right? Now, when it comes to online, on the internet, right? When I did my research in the Nazis, there was some quote about, that one of the first things I ran across was this Hitler quote in which he said something about demons, right? And it was just like, interesting. Now, if when I did I wrote my paper on, my thesis paper on the Nazis, what would have happened if I hadn't fact checked that? Right? What would have happened? Well, in this case, this is why you fact check everything, is that I look for this quote everywhere. Like, I Googled that thing, I'm like, where is this quote? Well, it's from the Hitler diaries, right? It was like, Hitler had a diary? No, he didn't. Some idiot, I believe in the 60s, said that Hitler had a diary, and then the author just actually wrote all this bullshit that he created a fake diary and then sold it and became a bestseller, and that's what it was quoting. Of course, it was fake, right? And then a decade later, or years later, they figure out it's fake and it's disproven, but not before all the hoopla and he's made millions of dollars, right? So there'll be a lot of those scammers out there like that too. But the point is that I fact-checked this fact. I found it was false. Done, right? So some of these things, it's not hard to fact-check them, right? Other individuals, Margaret Murray is a big example of this. Was a big disinformer. And Margaret Murray, we talked about her in our some of our things on medieval witchcraft or magic. Margaret Murray is a woman in 1920 who writes a book on, so she's an anthropologist, right? She's not a historian, but that's key, right? She's writing a book on the history of witchcraft, right? In the Middle Ages. She's not a historian, she's an anthropologist. That's a flag. That's a warning, real red flag there. Not too big, but a red flag all the same. And then she, of course, espouses, offering almost no evidence, that all of the witches killed are pagans, right, during this time. And the hilarious thing is that there were no pagans during that time, right? But she does that, and she latches on to what is occurring at the time, which is the pagan revival happening at that time, right? And then with the pagan revival, what she does, she makes this fake history book to jump into the pagan revival and then shoot off her own religion called Wicca, right? What she's doing is she's creating her own religion via this fake history book. So we do have to watch out for these things, right? There are these Pied Pipers who are out there who want to lead you down some path to crazy or disinformation to take you down a certain path. Militant atheism is a very good example of this. I know there are plenty of atheists out there. I like atheists. I have friends that are atheists. Militant atheism is something more sinister because it leads to a lot of prejudice. And it is very cult-like. And it's certainly a large element of brainwashing involved. The point of militant atheism is to take an atheist or an agnostic and then convert them into, obviously, someone who is militant against religion in general. So normal atheism, this is what an atheist is: someone who says, I don't believe in God, I don't think He's real. No, I don't have a problem with religion, I just don't believe in it, right? To each their own. You believe what you want, I'll believe what I want. It's all good. I like you, you like me, that kind of thing. A militant atheist, on the other hand, is like, Christianity is evil. We've got to get rid of religion. The sooner we get rid of Christians in the United States, the better. Religion needs to be done with. Religion is the cause of all the evils in the world. What else is there? They'll make up a bunch of things. B, they'll warp history to be anti-religious in any way possible, right? They'll cling on. There'll be like a few things that they're correct about, like witch hunts, right? In the Renaissance, right? And they're like, that's true. Christians were misbehaving. And then they'll exaggerate it. They'll be like, 2 million people died in the witch hunts, which we know it was in the thousands, right? Probably between 15 to 40,000 people died in the witch hunts. And they'll be like, 2 million people died. And you know what I mean? They're just blow it out of proportions to try to get you militant against Christianity and religion at large, right? Very dangerous individuals, because what they're effectively preaching is prejudice, right? They want you to be prejudiced. It's hilarious because they'll say, like, religious people are prejudiced, so we're going to be prejudiced against them. And so they end up being more prejudiced than the people that they think are prejudiced, right? It's like, okay, if you're prejudiced against all the people who are religious in the world, then you're talking over 80% of the world. You're talking 6 or 7 billion people that you're prejudiced against. That's a lot of people to be prejudiced against, right? So if you have been warped and brought down that path, the militant atheist path, let that be a wake-up call to you, okay? Just snap out of it, get away from all that, because it's not healthy. It's not healthy for your soul. It's not healthy to have all that hate in your heart. It's just unhealthy in general. So what they've convinced you of is false, but B, it's doing damage to you, right, as a person. You can't be at peace in your soul or in your heart or in your mind when you have all these people that you just hate. It's just not, you're going to be torturing yourself your whole life over something that's nonsense, okay? And a lot of it's untrue, all right? Anyway, where were we at? Disinformation. Anyway, so hopefully we've taught you a few ways that you can say, okay, right? How do I spot which book is which? How do I notice things on the internet? Stuff is obvious. If there's a news site, we're talking about news, if there's patriotnews.net, that's not a real news site, okay? If it's CNN, if it's BBC, if it's Fox News, etc., well, shit. I think we're going to have to cut, actually, I think we're going to have to cut Fox News out of that, but there's a lot of news sites, right, that may be biased, right? They are biased. CNN is biased. NBC, MSN, they're biased, right? They're very liberal. They're anti. They're not conservative at all, right? So they are biased, right? But what they're telling you, right, and what these news organizations out there are telling you is fact, right? It's fact. It's just biased. When we look at BBC, if you want really just flat, straight BBC without a lot of bias, I'd say BBC is the one to go to for your news. When it comes to the fake news, .org, .net, if people don't know what that is, then it's probably not a real news site, and you do not need to be trusting it, right? The Daily Mail, stay away from that. The Guardian, stay away from that, okay? Sometimes they go out good pieces, but a lot of times they'll put out fake crap too. So stay away from them for that sort of thing. Wikipedia. I know a lot of people will say, what, Wikipedia? I use Wikipedia for my research, and I'll tell you why, and I always have. Wikipedia is peer-reviewed, all right? People go onto that page and look at it and say, that's wrong. I'm going to make a note of that and delete it, okay? So that's what happens. I send it to moderators, and moderators end up deleting it, right? Anything that's fake. And I have been through I've used Wikipedia for many years. I haven't yet to find something on there that wasn't true as of yet, especially when it comes to history, because that's most of what I do. But I have yet to find something that isn't true on Wikipedia. And it's because it is peer-reviewed. Just like our scholarly book, and we had over here, well, this is a scholar one, Oxford University Press. Just like these books, right, it is peer-reviewed. Not to the level of the University Press, but at least it's peer-reviewed. And it's shocking, too. Wikipedia is a source of information for this stuff, but they do use their sources, right? They cite their sources. They cite where they got it from at the bottom of the page. A lot of times you can even click on it. You can copy and paste. You can Google that. You can look at that book and see and prove that, yes, this Wikipedia is true. That fact is useful. Yeah, so you can do that with Wikipedia, but you can't go to freaking Barnes & Noble and trust that what you're getting is real, because this thing was completely fake, and it was on the bookshelf there, right? Barnes & Noble, those books on there aren't peer-reviewed, right? The manager of the bookstore doesn't say, that's not a real history book, and takes it off the shelf or puts in a different section. Nobody does that, okay? And that's why I recommend Wikipedia. Britannica obviously is better, but Wikipedia is also really good for basic history research. I thoroughly recommend it for a normal person. For someone who's more into things, more serious stuff, get a University Press book to research history. They will not lead you astray. I promise you that. Okay? A lot of the things that you've been tricked about over the years, and the things I've been tricked about, was just reading a basic something that I thought was a real history book but wasn't, right? And what I have taught you today, right, are all things that I learned in my history degree. It's one of the most useful thing I learned was how to detect bullshit, how to detect, spot it, and get rid of it. Spotting bullshit. And that's what I do now. I fact check. I get paid to fact check things and figure out what's real and what isn't. So it's a very useful tool, and I just gave you an introduction and gave you some of those tools you can use for yourself in the future to find that out. And again, don't just believe what people say, right? If somebody says, when we talk about Google search, how to fact check something, if somebody says on there, ancient aliens built the pyramids, don't Google, if you want to fact check that, don't Google ancient aliens pyramids, because you're going to get a bunch of ancient aliens pyramid shit. Google, how were the pyramids built? Okay? Now you're going to find an explanation different than ancient aliens, okay? And that explanation is going to be the true one, all right? I hope this helped. Folks, unfortunately, we have to be very wary of cults, of conspiracy theorists, of disinformers these days. I hate it. I hate that the world has come to this, but I hope that the U.S. education system and the European education system, and really all around the world, all the education systems, will introduce the fundamentals of fact-checking into middle school. I really hope they will, because I think it's absolutely necessary. It's absolutely necessary that people know how to fact-check and determine what's real when there are all sorts of bullshitters out there looking to pull you one way or the next. Honestly, in ancient times, in ancient Greece, that was one of the first things you took, rhetoric, right? Basic logic and reasoning, right? How to detect bias, what's, that sort of thing. Fairly easy to detect bias. I remember this one woman sent me a book, and it's like, it's on something about the, it's a book on Rome and Christianity becoming like the dominant religion in Rome. The book was something along the lines of how the Christians destroyed the ancient world, how they ruined paganism, and how they sent the world into the Dark Ages, because they're a bunch of bastards, basically. More or less. That's the general what the thing gives you. And you can tell, okay, if I want to learn about the conversion, the change of Rome from paganism to Christianity, I do not need to read this woman's book because it's a bunch of biased propaganda nonsense, okay? Right? You can tell it's biased. Like, this woman hates Christianity. Well, if I want to get a balanced opinion on this and know what's really going on to be able to form my own opinion, I need to read something other than this woman's nonsense, right? And likewise, like, How the British Empire Saved the World. That's a book title, right? How the British Empire Saved the World. You think that's bias? It sounds biased, right? If you want to learn about the British Empire, don't read that book, right? Let's see. How President Barack Obama is the greatest president of all time. Probably don't want to read that book on, if I'm trying to learn about Obama's presidency, I don't want to read that book on Obama because I know it's incredibly biased, and I'm only gonna see the good things. I'm probably gonna see fake stuff, and I'm probably gonna see exaggerated stuff, and I'm not gonna see anything remotely negative in it. I'm not gonna get a realistic depiction of his presidency, right? You could say the same for anything, right? Yeah, I hope this helps you guys. We will go into a more in-depth thing on cults soon. Exactly who they look to recruit, who they choose to brainwash, how they brainwash you, step by step, how they do it. And I hope it will help people out there. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great rest of your day.